Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Alundra. Today we'll be climbing the Cliffs of Madness and exploring the Desert of Despair. Sounds fun? Well, we'll see about that. Frankly, I think the name Cliffs of Madness is pretty appropriate for this level, considering that basically you'll be tearing your hair out dealing with the usual perspective issues that plague all the platforming in this game. On top of everything else we have to deal with, exploring the coal mine, the crypt, and the dreams, now we start jumping diagonally across a variety of platforms where you can't really tell if you can jump up on something or not, like over there. Like, kind of looks like you should be able to make it, but you can't. And of course, remember from Bonaire's dream, even climbing a ladder is kind of a pain in the butt in this game. Anyway, there are a bunch of treasure chests. They're pretty easy to reach as long as you can handle the overall jumping and know the flow of the level. They contain some cool stuff. This is a magic elixir, it replenishes your magic usage. We only have one right now, so we're not going to abuse that anyway. This item, however, is a Wonder Essence, the best healing item in the game. It restores all of your health and all of your magic, and it activates automatically when you die. So you basically want one on hand all the time. Now, we can buy one from Lurvy if we buy the life vessel in his shop pretty soon. So basically, once you get enough money to do that, there's no excuse not to have one on you at all times. It's just that useful. Of course, this chest is just an herb, which we will never need, or very rarely need. What we really want to do here, and this will be important a little bit later, is pick up this gold bar and see how we're right above Lurvy's house right now. You can actually drop off into his chimney. Remember when we entered his store the first time, we heard him banging on something, much like Jess did when he was smithing. So yeah, also, he had a fire in the fireplace. You can see it behind him. That's a little weird. He didn't take any damage or anything, and Lurvy didn't make any mention of it. But apparently his big secret is that he fixes up junk and resells it, which is also strange because he only sells potions. Does he take garbage and mix it into elixirs or potions or whatever? What about the life vessel and the leather armor? Where did that come from? Doesn't make really any sense. But this is required for a bit of a bonus. You know, he tells us he'll fix something for free later. We'll get a bonus for that much later in the game, so might as well take care of it now. Anyway, moving back to where we were at that herb treasure chest so that we can continue on and eventually reach the desert. Yeah, after a while this basically becomes just a maze, basically, where part of the issue with the maze, part of the deception, is the fact that the game doesn't really tell you what level things are at. Oh yeah, and this is, by the way, the message that you get when you check a treasure chest that you've already opened. No big deal. And again, this is the second time we've seen a bunch of chests like this. I don't know why they couldn't have just given you sort of an arbitrary number of gilder from a single treasure chest. It didn't seem like it would be that difficult to program. But I'm not a game designer, so I guess I can't really comment. Anyway, we're at the top, so we'll climb this little staircase, and we will be in the Despair Desert. Now, let me tell you, this is definitely one of the least engaging levels I've played so far in this game, at least in terms of what I've recorded so far. The desert contains large amounts of sand, and sand impedes Alundra's movement, just like the water did in the coal mine, meaning we can't jump on top of things unless we get off the sand, and we can't move at our normal rate. It's also full of some fairly difficult enemies. We saw these before. They're not called ogres, said in the last episode. They're actually lizard men, even though they don't really look like it. We'll be seeing a lot more of them later, so I'll talk about that a bit more. There's only a few of them here at the start. Now that we have the iron flail, we actually have one of the optimal weapons for dealing with them, because they do block a lot of your attacks. And the flail makes it very easy to hit them during the opening in their animation, before they actually attack you. Anyway, check this jump out. If you line up exactly, you'll miss. You actually have to move up a little bit in order to go from one level up to one level down properly. Then you have to make this weird diagonal jump just to get this chest, which only contains 30 gilder. It's not really worth the time and effort it takes to make that jump, because believe me, it takes a lot of tries if you're not used to the controls of this game. Oh yeah, and there's also shifting sand, which moves you back, as if you weren't moving slowly enough. This chest, on the other hand, is much easier to get to. There's a little corner here containing some cobblestones that we can jump up, and it contains the desert's Gilded Falcon, which is fantastic. And of course, this whole area is made of stone, so we can just jump to the next part of the desert. Check this place out. There's an obvious path of platforms you can follow, so let's get back onto the cobblestones on the right side, dodging this lizardman guy. They're not really worth fighting. It's not like anything gives you large amounts of money. Make our way across these little platforms. Surprisingly, despite the fact there's nothing really exciting or interesting about this area, or this little corner that we made our way over to, we're actually about to pick up a permanent inventory item, and a pretty important one at that we're going to use to put to great use in solving the puzzles in the primary dungeon of this area. In this chest, we get the Sand Cape, which allows us to swim through sand as if it were water. It's very, very strange, in my opinion, that we get the item that lets you do that before we get the actual ability to swim in water itself. But I guess from a flavor perspective, that it's much more difficult to design an area where you would need... I should say, something that lets you swim through sand is much less utility, meaning it doesn't break the game wide open by giving you a lot of places to explore very early on in the game right now, you know, where we are. Also, you can't actually get out of the sand until you stop moving completely, including sort of inertia, which is part of the reason why you're going to hear that buzzer when I try to get out when I'm not allowed to, over and over and over again, as I puzzle out exactly how little you can be moving before you can actually surface. So moving along, there's one more treasure chest we can pick up, or at least show, so I might as well. Right over here, you'll notice that the fence around this area is slightly raised, meaning we can walk over, we can swim under it in our sand cape. Come on, stop moving, thank you. Of course, just contains another herb, and we're already all full. At some point in this episode, I actually stopped just opening up all the chests containing herbs, because it's a complete waste of time. See, listen to that buzzer. I can't get out of the sand at all while I'm on the shifting sand, because I'm still considered to be moving. It must break the game's code somehow, to try to sort of surface Alundra while he's in the middle of moving. I don't know. You can also move it seems like you can move very, very slightly faster under the sand than you can while jumping, and it's much less irritating for me as a player to not have to jump all the time just to move at that rate. Anyway, go back to this altar, move to the center, and we'll get swallowed in a tornado, which... There's basically no hint to that at all, I should say. It takes us to this area where you have to exit from the proper side of the screen on each of these screens. It's basically the reason why we need the Sand Cape. Exiting any of these screens from the incorrect direction will put you right back at the start where that altar was, meaning you have to start all over again. There's also a lot of wind in this area, so on top of the usual jumping constraints, we now have to deal with wind. But in general, just going whatever direction seems to be most difficult to get to will get you to this area, which is the teleporter, to the start of the next dungeon. We are at the Ancient Shrine. Again, at this point, it isn't really obvious why we need to come here, and certainly there's nothing really sending you here, except for the fact that it's the only place you can go after you get the clue that the bridge opened up to let us here in the first place, and of course you can always go to the fortune teller and she'll tell you to go here. This isn't for a crest or anything, we're just going to get more inventory items like the Sand Cape that allow us to proceed with the game's main plot, and eventually triggers event flags that allow us to go back into the dreams. In any case, we talk to a dead guy, and we get a new clue about, I don't know, something about whatever he said. Doesn't really tell you very much. Let's save our game very briefly. I'll show off the save room, because again, they're different for every dungeon, and they do, again, seem to take place inside the dungeon, which, well, considering they're basically only to be made use of by Alundra, save our game. I'm not really sure what that would be. And back out again, and let's begin exploring a little bit. Let's see what we can find. The first place we want to go, or at least the first place I believe we want to go, not remembering all that much about this place, is hit this switch over here, which unlocks a door later on. There we go, mechanism is activated. It also shuts us in for a while, and we'll have to fight, for the first time, sandworm enemies. We saw these in the dungeon, in the desert for a while, but we were never actually forced to fight them. They're pretty easy, they move fairly slowly, and their only real defense mechanism is to bury into the sand. They can spit sand at you, but they don't do very much damage in general, and their attacks are telegraphed significantly. So basically the way they can be threatening at all is if the game forces you to fight a large number of them at the same time, and even in that case, they're pretty easy to deal with. Notice that I only took 1 point of damage fighting 4 of them at once, or maybe it was 2 points of damage. No, that was 5 of them, I'm sorry. Anyway, we need to do that to get into this room. Notice already spike balls attacking us, a little scary. Really helps in this room to have the iron flail equipped and to stay on the outside with the cobblestones so that we can move at our normal speed, considering we can hit all 3 of the switches from this upper walkway here. Once you do that, then the door to the right opens and we can proceed to the next floor, which basically gives us, this is the first puzzle room that we've run into so far that basically illustrates the theme of this dungeon. There are these 4 tiles on the floor, and we'll have to pick up those 4 stones in order to match the obvious stone with the tile. Matching is obviously extremely easy, and there are even easier versions of this puzzle that we could have seen if I'd taken a slightly different path to this dungeon. Let's take care of this one first, though. Notice that there's no platform on the right side to pick up the sun and the water drop stones. So what you're supposed to do, not that this is particularly intuitive, is stack up the other 2 pieces, giving yourself a staircase up up to the upper floor. This is incredibly difficult to do, and I'm actually doing it wrong here, because it helps a lot if you do it on the cobblestones, where you can actually jump on top of the first one, as opposed to having to leap to them from the upper part of the area. See, notice here I can't even get on them from the front or the back. Also notice, although you can't actually see this particular taping of the gameplay, if you put one of the stones on the tile it's supposed to go on, it locks in place. Meaning that not only do I have to stack those up there, but I have to keep the moonstone from falling on the moon tile. These guys are called grogs. They're incredibly trivial to fight. They take 10 hits, and they can extend their hook to hit you. But they don't do that much damage, and they're not particularly aggressive. There's one particular area in this video where I have to fight them in a scenario where it's very difficult for me to attack them, and they can attack me sort of at will, but otherwise they're not particularly threatening. They just take a lot of hits, sort of traditional for zombies, not particularly threatening from an offensive standpoint, but capable of absorbing a lot of damage. Seems to be the treatment commonly in video games. Anyway, getting the 4 tiles on the right, getting the 4 stones on the right tile gives us access to this statue, which is another puzzle activation statue, similar to the ones that we saw in Lars's crypt. Apparently, as he says, there are 4 of them, meaning we still have 3 more to find. And now we've basically got our primary objective for this particular dungeon. It basically establishes the theme that we're going to have to deal with over the course of, the rest of the rooms. Moving in here, we see what would have been basically the first iteration of the puzzle we wound up with, just simple matching exercise. It's really nothing to say here. I mean, if you've seen the previous room, you know exactly how this room is going to go. The physics of throwing these things is pretty weird, I have to say. I still don't really have an effective gauge for how far they would normally go when I throw them, depending on the scenario. You'll notice this came up a couple times during the first time we tried to solve the puzzle, when I had trouble getting the 2 of them to stack up correctly. I'll explain that room a bit more later. The puzzle here is one of them is hidden behind one of these platforms, and of course, just like the very first room, 2 of them are on top of other platforms, meaning we have to use the other stones as stepping stones, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 stones! Anyway. So that's 2 of these guys. We're about halfway done, at least with this portion of the dungeon. And thanks to all the treasure we found on the way here, we're already at 200 Gilder, meaning we're almost able to buy the other life vessel from Lorby's shop. So the point of this room is that you have these closed eyes and these open eyes on the floor. You have to walk on the closed eyes. If you touch an open eye, both of the exit doors to the north and the south lock immediately. The puzzle here is that you have to pick up this barrel and use it as a platform to bridge the gap over there. It takes us outside for the first time, which is basically the halfway point of this particular dungeon, more or less. But since we're not quite at 15 minutes yet, I'll finish off this room since there are no puzzles here, just a lot of combat with the zombies. And I'll show the next room after this before I end things off. This is actually the first time that fighting these guys poses a legitimate threat. Just because on the stairs, it's very easy for them to attack you with their hooks, but you actually have to jump to hit them. Your flail will bang against the lower steps as opposed to hitting them straight up. Yet another way in which the perspective of this game just absolutely plagues us. God. To say nothing of the fact that even though the flail is about 50% more powerful than the dagger, it still takes absolutely forever to kill these guys. It really isn't necessary, but since the stairs and this general walkway is so thin, it's easier just to sort of prevent myself from running the risk of actually walking into them while dodging, than just to save the time by not attacking them at all. That treasure chest to the right contained herbs, which again I don't need, although it didn't occur to me that I'd taken quite a bit of damage during the previous fights, and I'm actually only down to 7 hit points right now. So I have very good reason, very shortly, to use up a little bit of my stash, and probably off-camera, I'll go pick up a couple of herbs between episodes that I missed. Anyway, this will be the last room we'll cover today. The puzzle here is basically to get to those stairs, and in order to do that, we'll need to be able to jump from these cobblestones, the only place where we have our actual full-fledged jumping abilities in this particular room. So, just for completion's sake, let's kill these sandworms. This is actually where I take the last bit of damage from me all the way down to actually needing herbs. Yeah, there we go, I'm down to 3. These do 2 points of damage on contact with the leather armor equipped, so thankfully we picked that up. Let's use a couple of these. God knows we'll have enough soon enough. Versus we'll be picking up plenty. And we'll grab that rock, throw it over, Alundra's throwing capabilities aren't damaged at all when he's on sand, which is pretty weird, because if he has trouble getting purchased, I don't know why. How would he have no trouble throwing? Anyway, that's about all we need to do today, so I'll close the episode off here. We'll jump on top of that rock, and onto the walkway, and up the stairs. And we'll cover the rest of the dungeon on the next episode of Let's Play Alundra.